Hello and welcome to Bust and Beyond with your host Robin Hayhurst. In this podcast, Robin will introduce guests that have known failure and want to share their story about how they got through it and what happened next. This will make you learn how to see things from a new perspective and avoid making the same mistakes. Please welcome Robin Hayhurst.
Hello and welcome to Bust and Beyond podcast. I'm Robin Hayhurst and I'm privileged to be joined today by Bill Hill. He's the Chief Executive of the Lighthouse Construction Industry Charity. Hello, Bill.
Hi, Robin. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. So we originally met at the award ceremony for the Federation of Master Builders when I walked up to you and said, look, I do a podcast and, would you be interested in coming on? Because it's a kind of quite an interesting subject and something that I think is really in keeping with what we do. And you said, what podcast is it? And I explained, and you said, I've listened to it. And I thought, wow, that's a rarity. So you actually know what the podcast is about, which is great.
Yeah, I doubled your listening numbers really that day.
Yeah, I think you most probably have, yeah. But there we are. The future's still bright, so that's great. So a bit about you, Bill. So what made you kind of end up being the chief executive of a charity for the construction industry?
Wow, that's how long have we got? I worked in the commercial side all my life, technology and commercial, so working for giants like Hewlett-Packard and Sage in sort of various roles, national roles, worldwide roles, etc. And the last company I was with said, basically they just bought another company. They just bought the company I was working with out, and they wanted me to move to the Middle East. And I asked my wife, I said, do you fancy a jaunt in the Middle East then to look after some of the businesses out there? And she said, no, you'll be going on your own then. I said, oh, okay, so time for me to make a break and do something else. And all along my commercial life, I had been raising money for a charity called the Wooden Spoon. My sport is rugby. I love rugby. And I've been raising money for the Wooden Spoon, which was the children's charity of rugby. So, and it just was happenstance that they were looking for a CEO. And I left the commercial world, went into charity world about 16 years ago, I think it was now, and ran the Wooden Spoon for a period of time and really, really enjoyed it, met all my rugby heroes. And then this role came up to run the Lighthouse Construction Industry Charity. And believe it or not, I was born and brought up in a little lighthouse off the west coast of Scotland. My dad was a lighthouse keeper. And I just thought, well, this has got to be it. This has got to be the charity that I do next. And sure enough, I went along for the interview. My dad's lighthouse cufflinks on. And they gave me the job, I think, on the merit of my cufflinks more than my capability. And I've been doing it for 10 years now, running the charity, and thoroughly enjoying it.
So what's the charity about? What's the aim of the charity?
Well, the charity itself is 100% dedicated to the well-being and the welfare of construction workers in the UK and Ireland. And the overall vision is that no construction worker or their family should be alone in a crisis. So we've put together a pretty major portfolio of services to help anybody who's working in construction in the UK or Ireland, to help them emotionally, physically or financially through any problems that they might have. And boy, do they have some problems that we need to help them with. And it's all our services are free to anybody in the industry. And we go around and try and shake up the companies up and down to see if we can get some money out of their pockets to pay for it for the greater good. And that's what we do.
I see. I mean, I've been in the industry my whole life, and it's a very kind of rough and tumble industry. We're all blokes. And that's nothing against, there's very few women in the industry, and it has grown a lot since I've been working in the industry. And, but from my recollection of sites in the early days, you just didn't see women in the industry. So it was a very kind of, blokes don't talk about their feelings, do they?
This is one of the major problems we have to overcome. 87% of the working population in construction, there's about 3.1 million people working in construction in the UK and Ireland, and 87% of those are men. So, yeah, it's very much dominated by the male psyche. Things are changing. I mean, there's obviously, as younger people come into the industry, we're seeing a different psyche coming into it. But the big problem is that culture you talked about there, is that, the male culture about not really wanting to talk about these type of things in open forum, and you bottle it all up and you get into some pretty serious problems trying to maintain your manly sort of psyche. And that is the big problem, is overcoming that stigma and getting men to talk and also to seek help.
Yeah, I think generally, I mean, I see in the industry, and I've always said we have our own sense of humour in the construction industry. We take fun of other people. I think that we make fun of other people. I think that's kind of quite common, but no one gets upset about it. It's because it's part of the industry. It's if someone outside the industry looking in goes, well, what's happening here? This isn't very nice. But it's just, I don't think it's a male thing. I think it's an industry thing. But I think the industry attracts the kind of people that enjoy that kind of thing, or they kind of tend to be that kind of rougher type of bloke kind of image. And generally, I think that becomes a problem perhaps kind of later on.
Well, I think there is a very, very fine line between, I think what you're referring to is banter. Banter versus bullying, there's a very, very fine line between the two. And that line can get crossed quite a lot. And, you've got this situation where there is a lot of bullying happens in our industry. It's a very shouty industry. The command and control structure is very shouty. And also it objectifies humans as well sometimes. Like I've heard so many times in sites saying, I need two bodies up there now. Well, that's John and that's Fred. And, they're just about to go home because of such and such and such and such. You're not even thinking about them. You just need two bodies up there now. That kind of behaviour needs to change. And that culture does need to change, especially if we are to try and encourage the next generation to come through into our industry, because we are desperately short of skilled labour over the next 5 years. We're around about 200,000 skilled labour shortage over the next 4 or 5 years, which is huge number of labourers. And you think about our industry compared to the other industry that Gen Z can choose from, and they look at our industry and look at the culture in our industry and say, not for me, not for me. And that's going to be a huge problem. Will the industry die? No, of course it won't die. There's lots and lots of business out there to be had. We get houses to build, infrastructure, and all sorts of things to do. But what will happen is you'll have a shortage of labour. And when you get a shortage of labour, the economics say that labour prices will go up, which is going to cause a real problem for people looking at infrastructure projects, etc. And the industry is not very good at adapting technology. It's got one of the lowest efficiency rates of any industry as well. So it's got a lot of work to do to work out this equation, this formula of low number of people coming into industry, working with technology and working with efficiency to see how we can balance that out. But one of the things we can do is try and improve the culture to make it a career choice for more people coming into the industry.
Yeah, I think that is a major problem. Most of the people I speak to in the industry, and I'm different in this, I set out to come into the industry, but my father was in the industry, fall into the industry. They're out of work, they get offered a job on site because that's what's available, and they start, and some of them really love it, and they kind of move on within the industry, but they don't actually set out to join the industry.
Yeah, and that is again, another perception that we've got to change in the way we advertise our industry to young people. At the end of the day, you look at the adverts that go out there for the Army or the Marines or the Navy or whatever. I was born in Sheffield, but the Army made me, or something like that, and they make it look really exciting. Well, this industry has got all that stuff. It's got all the techno stuff now. It's got big boys' toys to drive. They're all computer driven. We need accountants. We need all sorts of different people, draftsmen, etc. We need the whole panoply of people. But do we advertise it like that? Do we advertise it as an exciting industry to join? No, we don't. Do we do anything collectively as an industry to put that advert out there? No, we don't. So we're not helping ourselves. And I think we could help ourselves quite a lot. But underlying that, what we don't want to do is sell somebody a false promise, like come into this, it's absolutely fantastic, and then they find out the culture is really difficult for people to work in. And the generation coming through are looking for a lot more than the current generation is working, current generations that are working within the industry.
I think the culture is seen as non-professional. And unfortunately, social media doesn't help, cowboy builders, all this kind of stuff. But the other thing that doesn't help, I think, is it is kind of the highest risk as far as companies are concerned, and I think almost the lowest reward. So the longevity of companies staying in the industry isn't very high, which doesn't help for employment rates and people having that kind of process to move through a company where so many companies fail.
Well, do you know what? I'd probably contend that a little bit. I think if you look at the big tier ones, you're absolutely right. In turnover, but make a 2% margin. So they are on the cusp. If they don't get everything right, they are in deep trouble, deep trouble. But the industry is highly subcontracted, and that is one of the issues within the industry as well, is that you'll get a tier one who wins a contract, and then to deliver the contract, they have to subcontract. Those subcontractors don't carry the right amount of labour to win the project either, so they subcontract. And guess what? They subcontract. So you can get a project that has got maybe 5, 6, 7 or 8 layers of supply chain to work with. And every single one of those needs a layer of profit going all the way through to make the thing work. But the person or the organisation that carries the big risk is the tier one who signed the contract with the client. And they're carrying a huge amount of risk. And to try and distribute that risk down the supply chain as well. And at the end of the day, if you're actually working in, and this is another statistic, 53% of that 3.1 million people that work in construction are either sole traders on 0-hour contracts or contractors on agencies. It's a massive number of human resources are actually sitting there as small, very small companies or individuals working in the industry. And you can just see how that whole thing doesn't quite stack up. But if you're a good business person, a small business can survive really well within this industry if you're a good business person. And one of the things that I contend is that a lot of small businesses, if you are a really good brickie and then suddenly you get some more work than you can carry, you have to take on some other brickies to work. And this is where the model falls down, is you might be a really good brickie, but you're not a good businessman. And nobody teaches how to be a good businessman. You don't learn that at school. And there isn't much out there to teach you what to do, to put money aside when the going's good, to put money aside for the taxman, to put money aside for any capital investment you've got to make, etc. All of those things are not necessarily taught very well to the small business person. And that's why some of them go pop, is because it's cash flow and have got themselves into huge debt. Certainly our helpline gets a lot of calls from tradesmen who are in deep debt as a consequence, and they don't see any way out of it. And then they start looking at going to places where the interest rates are really high, loan sharks, to cover it off, and that just gets them deeper and deeper in debt all the time. So I think there's good business to be had, but I think we need better business people, or better business education.
I'm totally with you on that. That's what I do. But I mean, from my experience of that, I get a lot of people contact me, particularly through LinkedIn. Can I help them? They've got no money. But, an hour of my time, I will do everything I can for someone. And some of them, their problems are so solvable, they just can't see it. And one guy, for instance, he ran a company. I'm not going to name it or name what they did, just so I don't give the game away for him. But he was looking at going bust. He had double the staff he should have and half the income. And I actually said to him, well, just get rid of half your staff. Kind of solves the problem. And that was more scary to him, getting rid of half his staff, than actually failing as a business.
I mean, the thing is, it's a tough business. So when you're in, go back to rugby, you're on the field with your rugby mates. It doesn't matter where they come from or whatever, they are your mates that got you back on the field. And that's the same when you're in a small business, a construction business, because it is risky and you do need everybody to have your back. So it's almost like family. And, so I can totally understand that individual who has got somebody working for them and they don't want to dismiss them because they feel like family. And also, you don't know, the next contract is so hard to build labour. If you've got a good one working for you and you lose them and then you win another contract, it's so hard finding another good one because they are hard to come by, so it's that skilled labour that you can depend on. So you can see why people would want to hang on to staff and good labour if they've got good labour in their organisation. But, they need to go out and win the contracts and win the business to actually make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I often say to people, getting new labour, you're not going to get them off the couch. They're not sitting at home waiting for you. So you're going to actually be taken from someone else. So if you want good labour, what can you offer them? And I'm not talking about cash, that they're not getting where they are now. And one of the big things that people want is to be valued.
Without a doubt. And my little expression is, if you look after your people will look after your business. And it's as simple as that. And one of the things about, what we do as a charity, we deliver a whole bunch of free services that anybody can pick up. And a company can pick up and say, actually, we are supporting the Lighthouse. here's the free services I want to give to you. So it looks as if they're actually giving the services to their staff. So they don't have to invest very heavily to put a lovely portfolio of support services in place, which is probably sometimes only the domain of larger companies where you get employees, etc. So what we do as a charity is offer a safety net of services that anybody can give to their staff or their labour force to help and support them. And I think that's a good thing, because it says that you care. You're caring for your people by doing that, by giving them access to kind of help and support that they may need at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like a wonderful support structure. And I think it's so needed in the industry. And I come across so many people. I had someone, again, who approached me. They had taken a loan out. Now, they couldn't tell me what the interest rate was. We had to look it up. They'd asked for the loan in the morning and got it in the afternoon. We found out it was actually personally guaranteed against their house. It was a company loan, and the interest rate was 27%. You know, and I'm sure I told them to go and see a citizen's advice because I felt that it wasn't legally binding, the personal guarantee, because he hadn't taken any advice on it. But that's the kind of situation. And he didn't know how much money he needed, and he didn't know why he needed that money. He just knew he needed it. So he got what was offered rather than sitting down and work it out, because people often won't kind of grab the nettle of working out where they are.
Or don't have the capacity. I mean, and that goes back to, business management as well, and having the business management skills. You see yourself in a hole, you need to buy something, you haven't got any money, so I'll go find some money. Somebody says, here's some money, well, thank you. And you don't think about the consequences of that decision and what it might have in the medium to long term. And and for that type of individual, I mean, if you do come across them, Robin, then fire them. And it's sometimes quite difficult to get into citizens' advice as well. But fire them in the direction of our helpline if they're in construction, because we give them access to a lawyer free of charge as well to go through this stuff. So we can get them access to a lawyer straight away and look through the contract, if it's signed or not signed, and look at the legal.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that would be really helpful. I wasn't aware of what you did, so it's really nice to know. And I'm sure my listeners will be very pleased to hear that there's somewhere for them to go where they can get that kind of advice. Yeah,
that's what we're here for. It's emotionally, financially and physically. We've got all sorts of things available to us, and our caseworkers are incredible debt advisors as well. We've managed to get so many people reschedule debt as well to get them really out of the CAC in a short space of time, to know what is, the type of debt they've got to pay and the type of debt they can actually schedule away as well. So it's really important to be able to know those things. But wouldn't it be right? Wouldn't it be good if they knew that in advance themselves? And that's the point I'm making: is how do we get on the front foot with this? How do we get the small businesses to get educated in a way that they can run their businesses more efficiently as well, not get themselves into this trouble in the first place?
Well, interestingly enough, my challenge being out there teaching this kind of stuff, cash flow forecasting, a system called Profit First, which is about using different accounts for VAT and stuff like that, is that so many people just see it as a bit of failure to get any support. They won't get support because they think they should be able to sort it out. Just hard work will sort it out, which hard work's great. It's a great asset to have, but you don't know what you don't know. That's the problem.
I totally agree, Robin. It is one of those things, is you just can't work your way out of a problem without, sometimes you need the skill and expertise to know what you can do and how to get around some things as well. And there's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of, accountants. I trained as an accountant, so I know there's a lot of things you can do accounting wise, and there's a few tricks of the trade in there that you can put in place to get yourself to reschedule or to mitigate your tax liability in all sorts of ways. And some people don't even know when they're sole traders, traveling to and from work, they can actually put that and get, I guess they're chargeable expenses for work. And then they think, oh, well, I don't spend much every day. Well, okay, did you buy a coffee this morning? Oh, yeah, I did. Did you buy a sandwich? Yeah, I did. Okay, did you keep the receipts? No, I didn't. Well, why not? Because they are business expenses as a sole trader. You've got to have sustenance during the day. And if you add it up, you're probably spending 10 quid a day, maybe even more, 15 quid a day. And you add that all up and you say, well, that's a taxable expense. That takes off your tax liability. It's just simple things like that, and you've got to have the discipline as well. And it's so easy to keep receipts as well now. You got a phone, just take a photocopy on your phone. It's so easy.
Yeah, I mean, technology does, but we're not good at technology in our industry, as you alluded to earlier, and trying to bring people in to use technology. I try to get technology at the forefront of some of the solutions I offer, but simple technology, something that's really, really simple for people to use. people do not understand the problems they get themselves into. VAT is one. They suddenly kind of hit the threshold. They're getting this extra money coming in on the VAT. They're not understanding what to do with it. But even if they do run out with problems with VAT, it does happen. If you approach HMRC early and you go, I have a problem, they're pretty good. They will actually go, well, okay, payment plan, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do the other. If you approach them after the deadline, it kind of changes a little bit. So if they're chasing payment, it's a different ball game. If you say, I've got a problem, the week before or 2 weeks before, they're really good.
Yeah.
But it's that grasping the nettle. I think so many business owners tend to stick their head in the sand and go, I don't want to know it because then I won't get stressed out about it.
Indeed. And I totally get it as well. If you are a small business, especially a small business, and you're out there hunting for work, first of all, you've got to bring the work in. And secondly, you're trying to do the work, quoting for the work. Then you're doing the work. And then after that, you're chasing the next job at the same time as doing a snagging list on the last job and chasing down payment. I mean, it's just a constant circle of nightmares sometimes about how, and then getting the money in, and then people are always haggling with you as well. And then it's difficult. It's a very, very difficult industry to be in. Everybody's always wanting a deal as well. And everybody's wanting to knock a bit off the bill because they see something that maybe not quite right or just subtly wrong, but they want a big amount off the bill. And then when you finish the job, you're trying to chase the payment of the job whilst you're trying to quote for the next job. So it's a constant cycle. And if in the background, something like that comes along and says, you owe us £20,000 because you have and we what you owe us, you have to prove that you don't owe £20,000, which then takes you off that whole cycle of winning work, quoting work, doing work, because you've got to answer that one, because that is, if you don't answer that one, you're in deep poo-poo. So it's a very, very tough cycle, a very tough cycle.
It is a difficult, very challenging. I think the stats, or you might know the stats better than I do, but I think the failure rate in the industry is about 80% in the first 5 years. So it's very, very high, and people tend to focus on getting over the end of the month again and again and again, and it's draining and exhausting. And they don't, coachy speak, but they don't work on the business, they just work in it because it's like a whirlwind. It's like getting dragged into doing the work, getting there, doing that, getting over the end of the month, doing the work, getting paid, getting over the end of the month. You've got to plan a bit further in advance than that. Otherwise, you're just going to forever be in that horrible cyclone. Yeah,
and it's a tough place to be, and that's where a lot of our calls come to the helpline. Is that people get to the end of their tether with that as well. Say, look, I just can't cope anymore. And we've got vans going around a lot of sites as well. We've got to make it visible on tour vans, and inside those vans, we have 2 tradesmen usually go on site at any time, and those tradesmen have got what we call lived mental health experience, where a couple of them have tried to take their own lives as well, but they're now happy to go out and speak to other people to say, this is what was going through my mind and what was happening to me. They go on site, and the sites do a stand down and they talk to the individuals on site. And again, because they are tradespeople, I've tried this, it doesn't work for me. Some Scottish idiot, talking to them, I haven't got the same empathy as somebody who's in the trades and talking to them. So they talk to the people on site and they build empathy, and the trust builds, and people start talking, and they're really good at getting people talking about the issues. And then once we get people talking, we can say, well, now you've got an issue. Here's the helpline. Here's where you can go to get help and support. Now use it, phone it up, or whatever you need to do, contact it and make it. But the point I'm making here, Robin, is that we've been over to 500 sites now in the UK and Ireland. We've seen over 30,000 what I call boots on the ground. And we've had 132 critical interventions so far, which is people that have come after the talk and said, I am thinking of ending my life because this has become too much for me. And we've got them immediately into counselling as well to try and help them through that process. Now, normally you can't get into counselling. You go to your doctor and he gives you a sheet of paper and says, here's all the counsellors you could possibly go to. And you might get into one maybe 3 or 4 months' time. We get them into counselling almost immediately and get them back on track. And I'm really pleased to see that 132 are still with us as well. So, hand in heart, I can say some of the services that we are delivering and our industry is supporting is genuinely saving lives in our industry, without a doubt.
So do you have the phone number then? How would people contact you?
Yeah, there's UK phone number, which is 0345 605 1956. 1956 is the year the charity was set up. So it's 0345 605 1956, open 24/7.
What kind of problems do people come to you for then? So you start talking about financial problems. Is that the biggest one?
But by far, that is the biggest one, is they come to us with some sort of financial crisis and they can't put food on the table for the kids. That's as simple as it gets, and they've got themselves into some sort of debt problem. And, what we do is reschedule the debt. We also buy food. We've got some of the biggest accounts with the supermarkets, and we get food delivered to the house for the families. So they put food on the table for them to get them through the crisis point. We've got other people that have had relationship problems, because many of our workers are away from home for periods of time. It's difficult sometimes to manage the family relationship and keep that going. And sometimes when they're away from home, they might be drinking a bit too much, or they might have gambled a bit too much. So when they come home and, the family is expecting, the big warrior coming home with the big bag of cash, it's gone. And it causes umpteen problems as well. So relationship problems, then they find themselves homeless as well, that they haven't got anywhere to stay. So we help people get back into some sort of lodgings that are half decent so they can look after themselves and get back to work as well. So these are some of the big ones. And then we get the other ones where people have been injured. There's over 2,000 injuries that are pretty big in the industry every year, where it incapacitates an individual to such an extent they can't actually go back and do the same job. So again, we do a lot of work with those people that have been injured and helping them getting revisions to their home or whatever to help make it easier for them to get through it and get again back to work. Is the key thing, is to get back to contributing to society in some sort of way, not necessarily in construction, but it's good that we can get them back into construction in some sort of way.
And that must be very fulfilling to do that kind of work.
Oh, I can't tell you that. I mean, we have had some absolutely beautiful letters and emails back from some of the people that we have helped. And of course, we get the ones where, we lose people. We lose with 30 to 40 people every year with on-site fatalities. But our biggest issue within construction is the mental health, because 20% of all work-related or recorded work-related absence is due to stress, anxiety, or depression. And every working day in the UK and Ireland, we're losing 2 construction workers to suicide. So we're dealing a lot with families where, somebody has been in construction and they've lost that person, and helping the family get through that crisis as well. And also we're working with the sites where maybe there's been an on-site fatality, or even sometimes an on-site suicide, where the people that have seen that have actually had, vicarious trauma as a consequence of seeing something like that. And we work with them. We put a critical response team on site to work with the individuals to make sure that they don't have vicarious trauma as a consequence of seeing something like that, or at least we do something to mitigate it as well. So there's a lot of work to be done here. And, it does make you feel good at the end of the day that that you're making a difference.
I love that kind of thing. I love making a difference and helping people. I think what you're doing specifically for the industry, which I absolutely adore, is so important. I think the industry has a lot of change that it needs to do. We have to be seen as a more professional industry. We have to think about people's well-being better. Even conditions on site need to be improved dramatically. And, the failure in business, it has to be improved, because unlike other industries, I think we're not seen as professional. We tend to come off the tools and start running the business. So you might be a really successful plumber, fantastic at what you do. And then you think, well, I'm good at what I do, so I'm going to start a business. But what tools have you got to have those skills to start a business? And it's difficult. We haven't got a structured training for that. And you've got people that do it privately like I do. Some people can see the benefit in that and will invest in that and will get the benefit. But some people can't. They want to kind of go it alone and try and do it. And it's a shame, really, that there isn't more done as far as offering training and having some simple, basic stuff. This is not brain surgery. Running a business isn't brain surgery. It's really very basic stuff which can help people.
I totally agree. And I mean, we call this the Wellbeing Academy, but inside the Wellbeing Academy, there's a whole portfolio of e-learning tools that we've put together along wellbeing lines, but also we're launching stuff around about, I think it's coming out just before Christmas, because it's a tough time of the year about how to manage your finances as well. to look at that as an e-learning tool. But going back to your point, Robin, I think some of the stuff we are now developed, what I call, the gig economy is very much with us now. So there's lots of people gigging here, gigging there, which is basically small business stuff. But if that's the economy we're going to have in the future, then surely we need to do something about the education at the school level where, we get some basic finance in at school level where, this is how a business runs. If so many people are going to come out of school and possibly be part of the gig economy or be part of that self-employed tradesman or whatever, then, why can't we give them some of these simple school tools at school, which is not happening today, unless you take something specific like, business studies or something like that, you learn a little bit about it. But, maybe this is a tool that, we need to get back into the education system at an early stage.
I think we do. I think perhaps the people we're talking about, when they're at school, perhaps didn't do as well as others. I mean, we're talking about people that are drawn to working with their hands. I was rubbish at school, I must say, really not focused at all. But as I grew up, I kind of changed and kind of got more interested in education. So some of these people are not really paying attention at that point. So I think it's difficult. I think it should be available, definitely. We don't even teach people about mortgages and stuff like that, really, particularly. So, personal finance is a problem, let alone business finance. I think people don't see themselves as running their own business. I think it happens accidentally.
I agree. Some people just fall into it, but it's not necessarily a career choice. And if you look at some of the systems in Europe and you see the people coming through the education there, then at a certain point you either go down the academic route or the technical route at a fairly early stage in your education process. It's identified at an earlier stage. And what I like about what's happening over there is there's the hierarchy there. It's no different whether you go down the academic route or the technical route. You're seen as it's a level playing field. Whereas in this country, again, you do feel as if you're a second-class citizen just because you wanted to go into the trades. You say, well, if you don't do this here, you can always do construction, sort of type thing. Well, why? Why is that like that? And if you look at even the job roles that you get in construction, labourer, okay, so that doesn't give you a lot of pride. Go, I'm a labourer, so why couldn't that be called something like construction engineering level 1? And then construction engineer level 2, level 3, level 4, right up to architect, which might be construction engineer level 7 or something like that. So you could actually give it a better titling to just make people feel a little bit better about the roles, and even the way the government looks at the standard classification rules, it's called unskilled labour. Yeah,
and it's quite a skilled job, actually. I mean, when you just look at the money side of the construction. People let's look at professionals in construction as an example, but also trades. So professionals in construction, the site manager, it's a really skilled job. A good site manager makes all the difference to a project. Actually, for what they're paid and how they're viewed is nothing compared to what they are abroad. So I don't think they get the compensation and the value from the businesses they work for what the effect they can have on the site. And I've always thought that, we tend to we have contracts managers. A really good project manager or site manager doesn't need someone working above him to do the other work because he can do it. And I think they're of great value. And like I said, they are underestimated. But you look at a trade, you look at a plasterer or a good carpenter, people say, oh, I'm paying £250 a day. Well, you're quite happy to go and pay £400 an hour for a solicitor. Why do you value that more than someone who's really skilled at their job? There's not that many people out there that are really good skilled carpenters.
Again, you're talking about the inequalities of life to a certain extent, But I think as a generalization, people have a view that the wages inside construction are pretty poor. They're not. They are actually not. All the research says it's actually pretty well paid. But the perception outside is it's not. The perception outside, I think there was a study that came out, I think it was done, who was it done by? I can't remember who it was done by, but it says something like but 70% of kids at school think that construction is really dirty and horrible and it's poorly paid. I mean, that's an image problem.
I agree with you. I mean, it is definitely, we have a huge image problem. But I still think there's key roles in the industry which are underpaid compared to other industries of the same ilk. And the kind of, going back to site managers, I suppose I keep going on about that because that's where I started. That's where I kind of first got into the industry. Well, I was on site before that, but But, they could be running a site which is turning over multi-million pounds, maybe 20, 30 million pounds, compared to someone who is running a branch of Tesco's or Sainsbury's. I don't think they're as well paid. And they're looking at the personnel in that, they're almost running their own company because of what they do in some companies. In some companies, they're not given anything to do and they're not really trusted, but in some companies. So I think that's why I think there's a difference, But the skill, brilliant at firefighting. They're often sought after in other industries because their firefighting ability, and really, really good at adapting and changing to what's happening around them, because we work in an environment which we can't predict. So the skill level's really high.
No, again, I've never met a better group of solution providers, to overcome problems on a day-to-day basis. And, that drives you back to some of the things as well about the government put in place where you can claim a tax benefit on research and development. If you've got actually some R&D where you're actually working on something that you have to do research and then develop a solution around it. And our industry, I think, was the poorest at claiming any of that, even though every single day of the week they're probably doing some R&D to go fix a problem. And they're not taking advantage of some of those taxes, which I think the government's now taken away, by the way. The things like that is solutions, always built around a solution. And yeah, I totally agree. It's a very, very skilled environment. We should cherish it more.
Yeah, I totally. And I think the general public, the perception of the industry is what we see on television, which is budgets that we go over. And actually things like the rail link and stuff like that just kind of reinforce that we're cowboy builders, the budgets we always go over, we never produce things on time. And actually in this country, we're really good at all that stuff. But it's not the stuff that we shout about.
The image of the industry is something that the industry needs to look at as a collective and not as individual brands. They need to look at that and do something about that as a collective. You just don't have the same sort of reach doing it as a brand, whichever company you're with. You can't actually push that. So I think that's something that the industry needs to work on. But again, the industry is notorious about not being able to work together and do something like that collectively. But that's what needs to be done. In my view, that's what needs to be done. To change the image, we need to work together to change the image and do some serious advertising on the different media outlets as well to try and change the image. But the thing that, again, is so difficult to change, I've done a lot of toolbox talks in my time, and I often ask the question when I go on site to say, how many of you guys in this room have got kids? Lots of hands go up. How many of you are advocating career in construction for your children? 99% of the hands go down. So I think if we don't get the people working in the industry advocating that this is a good place to work, then what chance have we got to bring people in on the future? So we need to work very hard in making it a better place to work today, and they'll advocate for the future for us.
I totally agree with that. It's quite an adversarial industry on many levels, and I think that needs to go, and collaborative working in so many ways needs to come in. But I think we're moving towards it. It's just very slow, very, very slow. Anyway, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Just before we go, because I think what really, really important podcast for me, because I didn't know what you did exactly and what help was available. Can you just repeat for everybody how to contact your charity, the name of the charity and the information around the charity?
Okay, so the Lighthouse Construction Industry Charity, and you can contact us on our 24/7 helpline, which is 0345 605 1956, or you can access the portal, which is makeitvisible.info. What we're trying to do there is make welfare and well-being in construction visible in sight, on every site. Makeitvisible.info. You'll find everything there to help you and get support. And if I could just fire off just one last little piece of golden nugget is my three little golden nuggets is, if you don't do anything else, there's these three things you can do tomorrow. First of all, if you see somebody in trouble, don't ask once, ask twice, are you okay? Because sometimes the second time round, you get a different answer. And if you do get somebody to talk to you, try and listen and respond non-judgmentally as well, because they've got a problem. And it might not be a problem to you, but it's a problem to them. So try and listen and respond non-judgmentally. And the third little golden nugget is always be kind. There's no reason to be unkind to a fellow worker on your side. Just be kind if you can.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for taking the time to speaking to us.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Bust and Beyond with Robin Hayhurst. Be sure to tune in next time and visit his website at robinhayhurst.com.